20 Questions With is sponsored by Made in Britain. The Made in Britain trademark makes it easy to identify amazing products being manufactured in the UK right now. Promoting more than 2,000 manufacturers, it's an internationally recognised trademark of trust for British-made goods, showcasing quality, provenance and craftsmanship. Discover the home for British manufacturing and visit madeinbritain.org. Rachel Johnson, it is lovely to see you.
It's a joy to be here, and I'm a great supporter of Made in Britain too. What a great organisation, and very much needed right now.
It's really important, I think, that we champion British manufacturing because it's an uncertain world. And so to become as self-reliant as we can be, I think is key.
Couldn't agree more, especially tariffs. Like the more we produce here, the better off we will be.
You are, as well as being an LBC presenter and as well as being a writer of novels, a writer of non-fiction, a writer of newspaper and magazine columns, you were editor of The Lady, you are the host of the Difficult Women podcast. And
Yes.
I am interested to know whether you prefer being interviewed or interviewing.
That's a very good question, actually, because I prefer interviewing. I think only real narcissists like being interviewed. I find it very uncomfortable making, because of course I feel deeply unworthy. I'm always really surprised when I'm asked to be interviewed or to go on a chat show. I didn't understand what people think they're getting. And I always assume it's because of who my sibling is rather than anything to do with me.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, of course, you are the sister of Boris Johnson, and not just the sister of Boris Johnson, but the sister of
Joe
Leo
Johnson,
Johnson. Yeah.
Leo
And
Johnson,
Leo
Max
Johnson,
Johnson,
Joe Johnson. You have a half sister, don't you, I think?
Julia Johnson. Yeah, lovely half sister, very, very talented.
But looking at your CV, so you are part of a famous family. Your father is famous, your mother was a well-known artist, wasn't she? And you are part of this famous family, a sort of dynasty, I suppose. But your CV is extremely impressive. So you have worked your way up. I mean, no doubt you've had some privilege, as I have had in my life, but you've worked your way up, haven't you? You've earned the right to be where you are and to be a public figure, I guess.
Is that one of the questions?
Yes.
What I would say to that, Matthew, is I completely understand. I check my privilege a lot. I mean, all the time. And I have to tell myself that I wouldn't have a podcast or a radio show or a column or be published unless they were publishable. I was, a good enough radio host to keep my slot, because everything is about business now. Everything is about the numbers, and there is there's no commercial gain to having somebody just because of what their surname is, especially if it's such a pedestrian surname as Johnson. There's no cachet in it and there's no clicks in it.
Is that the end of your answer?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, my
And
third
also,
question.
thank you for saying my CV is impressive. I mean, I think my CV, it's gone like, I started off really well, kind of, and then it's kind of gone down. It went down quite steeply, and now it's kind of plateaued. You start at the FT, it's always going to be downhill from there, isn't it?
I guess that's a matter of opinion. My third question for you is this. Why Difficult Women? Why is that the title of your podcast? You've now done many episodes with lots of women.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
just explain to those who haven't listened to it what the angle is, because it's an interesting title.
Okay, full disclosure, I did steal the title from Helen Lewis, who wrote a book called Difficult Women. And I thought that's a really good title. And she used the title as a nod to when Ken Clark was being interviewed by Sky, and he thought he was off mic and he was talking about Theresa May. And he said, bloody difficult woman. And it went very viral, Theresa May, bloody difficult woman. And I thought it's a very good way of hooking in women into this podcast. A lot of them don't like it and won't do the podcast because it's called Difficult Women. They go, ooh, I don't even call myself a feminist. I don't want you to think I'm difficult. I was like, why not? What is wrong with being difficult? For goodness sake. I mean, it's just a it's just the name of the show. It's people get really worried and stressed about it. And I have to tell them about Ken Clark if they don't already know.
Are you a difficult woman?
No, you see, that's the thing. I think, like many of my guests, I think I'm far too easy. Women should be more difficult, right? That whole business of are you a controller or a pleaser? Too many women are pleasers. They should be controllers. They shouldn't apologize for telling someone off or saying what they think or complaining or criticizing somebody. This is what men do all the time, and that's kind of being a boss. But when women do it, it's being difficult. This is a very cliched, thing to say, by the way. It's not, this is not news.
Has it been difficult being a woman?
Oh, well, you see, I used to pretend I was a boy when I was growing up because I thought being a girl clearly sucked compared to being a boy. And I wanted to play football and rugby and cricket. And so I did. And I went to an all boys prep school and I thoroughly enjoyed it and I really thrived there. And then I found myself in all male environments, literally until I was at St Paul's Girls' School. Then back into an all male environment at Oxford. Basically, the college had only become what do you call it, mixed about 7 years before I got there. Then I was the first female graduate trainee at the FT. And then, it was only until I got to the Lady magazine in, whatever it was, can't even remember, 2009 or something, that I was in an all-female environment for the first time. Literally, that was the first time in my 40s or even 50s, I can't remember. So is it difficult being a woman? No, I don't think it is. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. It's not easy, but it's definitely not difficult.
Hang on. You said as part of that answer that you went to an all boys prep school.
Yeah, I did.
How did that work?
Well, I mean, this is a story I've told before, but when we were living in Brussels and we were at the European school in Brussels, all at that point, Alexander, Boris, me, and Leo, and there was we were all being taught in the same year group because it was the first year that England had joined the common market. So all the English kids were in one class. So they felt that my brother, now known as Boris, was too gifted to, he needed more than that. So they said to my parents, you need to send him to school in England, to a proper classical prep school, feeder school to Eton type place. And so they were then given two options by this educational consultancy, famous one, now defunct, I think, called Gabbatas Thring. And they said the Dragon School or Ashdown House. And they said the Dragon is like big. And, if you want something small where it's very focused attention, you should send him to Ashdown. Now, there's a whole separate conversation about Ashdown, which has been closed down. But at the time, they thought this was the right place for Alexander to go. And so they rang the headmaster. They said, we have this gifted child. And the headmaster said, great, send him in September. And then they said, and Rachel will also come the following September. And he said, no, I'm afraid we don't take girls. And my father said, well, you do now. So I arrived as the only girl, apart from one other, who was also the sibling of a current student. And we had our own dormitory, just the two of us. And the rest of them were boys. And it was a very character building experience. Very character building. Don't forget, I'd grown up in an all boys household as well, because I had three brothers. So then I was sent to an all boys prep school. So kind of it was an extension of that, competition, sport, very academic, very unemotional, nobody really cared whether you were miserable, unhappy, bullied, not eating, all of those things. And you had to just stay alive, basically. So it was a very good preparation for anything that life was then going to throw at you.
Opportunities for girls growing up today compared to girls growing up when you were growing up. And
Yeah,
unbelievably, you're going to be 60 later this year, I think, just so
I
people
know. Yeah.
know when you were growing up.
No,
But
it's not unbelievable. It's Anno Domini, Anno Domini. Yeah.
but the opportunities now are very different from what they were then.
Yeah, I think so.
Like
Yes and no.
expectations, very different. Why do you say yes and no?
Well, yes and no, because of course you see the Lionesses winning another title. And yes, of course you see female prime ministers. But at the same time, it's a bit like geography. You can never move Britain 22 miles, which is 22 miles from the coast of France. That will always remain immutable, geography, our place in the world. And by the same token, you cannot change the fact that women bear and suckle and basically look after children, to an extent that men still can't and don't. And so you're always going to hit a roadblock, which I think is called biology, if you intend to reproduce and have a family life of any sort. And it's that really, it's childcare it's caring more than childcare that I think gets in the way of female actualization. I mean, it just, you just have an additional job. I mean, I'm not minimizing what men do at all. And I know you, Matthew, do lots yourself, because I've seen it. But when I was having my children, it was my funeral, basically. I had to be the one to make sure the children were cared for, or I went to the FT or I went to the BBC. It was no one else's job but mine. And that is tough. And I don't think that has totally changed, is what I'm saying.
Do you enjoy the mix of what you do in your working life? And do you have, to use that terrible phrase, a good balance between your working life and your personal life?
I don't really need to think about balance anymore. I literally have a portfolio of things that I really enjoy doing. And I'm very, very lucky to have sort of put it together and to have it. But every single day, I think, I'll be, that column will go, or this show will, or I'll be cancelled, or I'll be sacked. But then I love that feeling of having to kind of find something else to make an opportunity out of that crisis. I mean, being fired is a very galvanizing force. And I always tell my kids, who are now kind of trying to find work and establish themselves in their careers, that, just never sweat it too much, because out of it, you can build something better. If you've been fired from something, that means you weren't right. It's very often business. It's very rarely personal. And it gives you a chance to kind of do it or try something else. I mean, I'm speaking with privilege, because I've never been short of work. But I do enjoy working. I think what would be really hard is doing absolutely nothing. Who was it who said the worst job of all is no job? I can't remember who said it, but there's some truth in that. There's something really soul destroying about wanting to work and needing to work and not finding any work.
I really enjoy the mix of stuff that I do, but still, at the age of 45, I'm still hustling, Rachel. Do, do, have you felt like you've had
Never.
to hustle or not?
I love the hustle. I hustle all the time, Matthew. You've got to pitch, you've got to, throw things out there, and you've got to, because just remember this. Somebody told me this right at the start of my career when I had my first book out when I was at Oxford. When I met with a publisher, and actually Weidenfeld, Lord Weidenfeld in London, found it was like, there are a couple of times in your life, or two or three times, when you get a call or a letter that changes your life. And this was my first. Found a note in my pigeonhole saying, please ring, Antonia Duro, whatever. So I call her. She says, will you come up to London and have lunch with me and Lord Weidenfeld? So I was like, of course, she says, we've got a proposal. So I go and have lunch with Lord Weidenfeld at her house. And this is the time when, you won't remember this, and your listeners probably won't remember this either, but the daughter of a cabinet minister called Olivia Channon, had died in the rooms of a man called Count Gottfried von Bismarck. And the world's press had descended on Oxford. The editor of Vanity Fair had come, Vanity Fair was doing huge stuff. Everyone, it was like a Times page 3 lead day after day. It was a big story. And Weidenfeld thought, I want a book about Oxford. And so there I was, and he said, will you do me a book about Oxford? And I was like, yes, of course I will. So then I went away and I was like doing mods or something. And I had to then get this book together. And I commissioned essays from Toby Young, Neil Ferguson, Aidan Hartley, who writes for The Spectator, Boris, Allegra, who then he married, Allegra Mosser, and a whole bunch of the kind of the people I could sense were going to be writers. And I have to say, I called it quite right in about 8 out of 10. And that was my first book. And my point is, Matthew, getting back to the point, you have to hustle because when the opportunities come as a freelancer, and I know it's really hard to say no rather than yes, isn't it? Because you think if I say no, I'll never get asked again. So I do tend to say yes. And I just think, I don't know, it means you work hard, it means you earn, and you just do loads of different things. I can't recommend it highly enough.
You mentioned in that answer that you were probably studying mods. So you studied classics at Oxford, didn't you?
Yes, good pickup. Yeah.
And yet,
Mods and grades.
and I studied
Yeah.
classics at Cambridge, and
Yeah.
I helped teach one of your children Latin at some point a long time ago. Why did I need to be doing the teaching when you could have been doing the teaching?
Was it you or was it your brother who taught?
It was
I
me.
thought it was your brother.
It was me.
I think you both did because I'm useless. I can't teach. I can't remember anything. It's in one ear, out the other, honestly. If you ask me what I did on my show on Friday at 5 minutes past 10, when I've been on air from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., I wouldn't be able to tell you. I literally have to sit down and think, now, what did we talk about?
And yet there are people in public life, and I think your brother Boris Johnson would be one of those. And I'm thinking of Tom Holland as two examples who seem to be able to reach for classical analogy or historical reference. And yet, and I
I
can't do
know.
that. And you're
I
saying
can't do
I can't
it.
do that. So why
But
can't we do that?
well, I think I've nursed a theory that childbirth wipes your memory clean. I mean, I literally can't remember anything about anything I've studied. It's easier to retain my A levels. I can remember my A level stuff, but I think Oxford was, you had to read so much. You remember? I mean, I don't know about Cambridge, but we had to read the whole of Homer, the whole of Virgil, all the tragedies, all the Roman poetry, and then all of Herodotus, all of Thucydides, all of Plato, all of Aristotle in the originals, and then be examined on it for mods. And of course, your brain just explodes.
Childbirth doesn't really help me in trying to understand why I
No,
can't reach for
no, it
historical
doesn't. It's not, you
classical.
can't have that excuse.
Do you enjoy being the writer or the broadcaster more than you enjoy being an editor or being someone who brings together other people's work, as you mentioned in that book on Oxford?
Do you know what, Matthew? I genuinely think I'm just a writer, really. I'm very lucky to have a radio show, but it's not my medium. And I think interviewing is very natural for me, but carrying a 3 hour radio show is a particular skill, I think. And there are very few star strikers in the business. And I'm very lucky I've got one hour, one show a week on LBC because it is so, because you've done it too, it is so much harder than it looks. I mean, just saying one interesting thing in 3 hours is really difficult. And, you know, what I like about it is that it's a new skill, right? And that's what I enjoy is doing new things, finding new things to learn, crafts. I've never written a screenplay. I'd love to write a screenplay. I think it's really hard. I mean, I don't go into anything thinking it's going to be easy. In answer to your question, editing, I love commissioning. I think I'm a very good, I'd say, though I say so myself, I'm very good at finding the right person to write the right article at the right time. I'm not that interested in copy editing. I'm not that interested in layout. When it comes to radio, I think it's an incredible, I love learning a new skill. I'm not there yet. And, as long as they have me, I want to do it because I just want to get better at it.
As you say, though, you've been there for, well, you've been doing it for years
5 years,
and
5 years.
they
Yeah, I know.
wouldn't
God knows.
they wouldn't have you if it wasn't commercially viable, Rachel.
Well, well, as we know, yeah, the numbers don't lie, Matthew. Your ray jars, you're only as good as your last ray jars.
I love doing those shows on LBC. Mine were mostly in the middle of the night, although sometimes in the daytime. And I felt like towards the end, I felt like a chef with loads of different ingredients. You had the callers, which were obviously central to the
Yeah,
show. You had news stories, you had breaking news, you had anecdotes, you'd had what you'd been getting up to, you'd had amazing stories that others had told you. You had the front pages of the newspapers and so on and so forth. Like it was just an amazing job.
yeah. I don't get to do all that kind of newspaper review stuff. With my show, it's like they really want to foreground the callers, right? The guests are kind of secondary. They're like the icing on the cake. The cake is the main thing, and that's your relationship with the callers. And that you have that's something you have to learn because you can when you start a radio show, you think, I want to get Nigel Farage, I want to get Donald Trump, I want to get Theresa May, I want to get Michelle Obama. But actually, the listeners don't really care. They don't. They've heard Michelle Obama or Nigel Farage or Theresa May already. What they want to hear is somebody ringing up and saying something totally extraordinary, and you talking to them. That's what they want to hear, isn't it?
You've had to, you say you've learned this skill of being a radio presenter. You have to think on your feet as a presenter on LBC. Did you feel that you were learning how to think on your feet, or had your various roles and jobs and the way you live your life, had that trained you in some way?
Um, no, I mean the best bit of all, as you say, is the breaking news. When something happens, when you're on air, like as Zelensky is being upbraided in the White House by Donald Trump, and the whole world is like staring at the Oval Office, and you're on air, and you have to kind of somehow reflect the moment, keep the show going, bring the news updates, take the calls, get to a guest, change the subject at the half an hour, go back to the subject, you know, then you got another bit of breaking news. That's when it's really fun, really, really fun. And I didn't feel a kind of because I've been trained in as a news reporter at the beginning. Supposedly, I think I was a shit reporter. I understand what's a story and what's not. So if I'm looking as you do at your screens and you can see something happening, you can say, look, that's going on. We need to do that. Because sometimes the guys in the gallery aren't necessarily across it because they need to keep your show on the air. They need to make sure they've got calls coming in. So sometimes something happens and we just pivot. And I love that because news never stops.
Was it a relief when your brother stopped being prime minister in this sense that you, as a public figure, as a journalist, as a presenter, were no longer the sister of the prime minister?
Yeah, no, but I mean, it doesn't make any difference really. You're just sister of Boris still, which is fine. I'm very proud of being, him, blah, of being his sister. Uh, it's, you have to accept that that's the hand that life's dealt you. Um, it's, I would imagine that, it's a net. If you netted it out, it's a net positive rather than a net negative.
But was it difficult being asked about a member of your family who was as powerful as your brother was?
What
Was
when people call, oh God, terrible, very difficult to be on air, have people ring up and just talk about, Brexit or COVID or things that were going on in government, which you couldn't afford to ignore as because you're doing a current affairs show. It's much easier now not having to have everything refracted through the kind that prism of it's his bad all the time. Um, and so yeah, it's a huge relief because it's very, very tiring because one, I'm a loyal sister, but two, I'm just a voter as well, and three, I'm a radio journalist. And those three things can be in opposition to each other quite a lot. And so you have a kind of my mental struggle. um, it's tiring, yeah.
one of the books you wrote, Notting Hill,
Yeah,
one of the books you wrote, Notting Hill, in the mid 2000s, I think, followed by Shire Hell, leads me to wonder whether you enjoy living in London more or less than you used to enjoy it.
I love London. I mean, I've been in the neighborhood, um, Notting Hill, since 1979. I will leave this house feet first. I always say to my husband, we have a lovely place in Somerset, but I couldn't live there because it's too isolated. It's like two miles from tarmac. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, you can go on wonderful walks, but it's an hour round trip to get a pint of milk. So I still love living in London. Yeah, I can see your dog, by the way.
I was going to ask you about your dog. Does having a dog make your life appreciably better?
Um, that's I love Ziggy. It is quite difficult, in terms of it's a bit like having a child. You've got to get the childcare in. For example, tomorrow I'm going to work. Ziggy will be here on her own because my husband's going fishing. So we think about that. So you are never really free of responsibility. But um, I think people like responsibility because it gives their lives some purpose. There's that whole thing of you have to walk the dog, you have to feed the dog. Um, this is what you're here on earth for. It's what people need.
What music do you listen to?
I'm a terrible middle of the roader. Yeah, last night I was at the Oasis, just done my Substack on having been to Oasis last night and to my relationship with Noel Gallagher. I mean, it's not a deep relationship with Noel Gallagher, but I have spent some time with him. So if you are interested in reading that, it's called the Rachel Johnson Papers. Um, oh, all the 60s and 70s greats from the Beatles to Joni Mitchell via Neil Young, all of them.
Classical music?
Not enough, not enough. Even though my grandfather was a very good pianist, I'm a bit of a I'm I know nothing about music really. I know nothing about wine. I know nothing about history. When I die, it's going to be like my brain is virtually box fresh.
What is the art form that moves you most or that gives you the greatest joy when you experience it?
I think it is music. I think it is the most pure art form in terms of how it keys into your emotional range, more than painting, more than fiction. Um, Music. Yeah. What about you?
Music.
Yeah.
But I have
Yeah.
occasionally been in a theatre and been almost wrenched out of my seat by what I was watching. I think of Ian Holmes' King Lear, I think directed by Sir Richard Eyre at the National at the Cottesloe when I was in my mid to late teens. I think of a Greek tragedy. Sometimes theatre can be incredibly powerful and great art, as in paintings, can really move you. Although I'm not brilliant at going to galleries. Music is, I think, it's my go-to.
No, I think you're right. I think it is most people's go-to.
I'm going to end by asking you a question that was not supposed to be sort of macabre or anything, but we're all mortal, and I wonder whether you ever think about what your legacy might be, what you might leave behind, let's hope in many, 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 many years' time. Do you have a sort of sense of your place in this world, in the universe? This sort of big question, really, but something that perhaps doesn't get asked very much. I'm not sure I've asked it in this series yet, and this is something like the 129th episode of 20 Questions. Partly,
I mean, I've thought about that before. Um, I think the reason why people do write books is they hope that that is going to be something more of a lasting legacy than I don't know what else they might do. The company they started, or in terms of my own legacy, I don't. I mean, I've written a few, and I think one hopes that also your children are going to be your legacy. You want to see them flourish and live as big lives as they can, given the constraints that that generation is operates under now, which I think is really tough in terms of housing, in terms of employment, in terms of all of those things. I think I had many more opportunities and latitude and kind of in terms of, look, I'm living in this house. Like what they would never be able to afford this house anyway. So I worry about them, and I wish that my legacy was them rather than anything else I've done for their sake, really. Because you want to think that your children are living bigger, better lives than you are, but I don't think that's happening right now, and I think that's a big problem, and I don't see how that's going to change imminently.
but just to finish on an optimistic note, It's my fault. It's
Okay.
my fault that I led you down that
You brought
path.
in mortality.
I did.
Yeah,
But so
yeah.
bonus question. I mean, you do strike me as someone who, I mean, I'm sure we all have our issues. I certainly do, but you strike me as someone who really enjoys life, who tries to make the most of life.
Totally. Oh my God, every day. I feel it's such a bonus. I didn't need a bonus question for me to say that. Every day, I think it's great. I feel so lucky to be able to do the things I do, just to be in this world, to walk down the street, to get a cup of coffee and, the Portobello, where I've been able to buy a cup of coffee, for years and years and years. I love it. I feel so bloody lucky, Matthew.
But I've bumped into you from time to time over the years in Notting Hill, and
Yeah.
you exude this sense of calm,
Do I?
which I think is interesting, given that your currency, at least recently with your more recently with your broadcasting. I mean, it's sort of high octane stuff, isn't it? It's in the middle of things. And, even before broadcasting, you've always done broadcasting on and off, haven't you? In some way or other, you're being interviewed, giving your commentary on things or whatever, I imagine. But, you've writing columns in national newspapers. That's part of being sort of in the thick of things, I suppose, even if it's a solitary thing, even if you're in a room writing it. But you exude this sense of calm, which I think is impressive.
You know what? That's so kind of you to say. I think what it comes from is having to remain calm in quite stressful situations, quite right from the beginning. Um, and, exam stress, having not terribly well mother, just, being on, having quite an unusual childhood, all those things, having to compete, having to get jobs, having to keep them, having to combine jobs with childcare, having to, get through the death of a parent, which Matthew, is absolutely like a bomb going off in your life, keeping the show on the road as life goes on. Um, it does help if you have a kind of a strong inner core, which tells you every time, the shit is hitting the fan. This will be all right. You can do it, and to try and convey that to other people, especially to your children, so that they don't panic, because you know it, there can be some quite scary situations, and it doesn't help if everybody loses their head. Just read Kipling. It has it all in there. In if
Very good that we
never has there been a better summary.
Very good that we were able to end on a reference, a literary reference. Rachel Johnson, thank you so much for answering my 20 questions plus a couple of bonus ones.
Matthew Stadlin, thank you so much for asking me to answer them.